thanks. It's great to be here. I was over at Fulton day before yesterday, I think it was, and we had a big crowd over there, about 350 students that showed up. We had one small room we were meeting in, and we overflowed that, and we moved out to the main auditorium over there at the Benjamin Fine Arts Center, and we just had a great time. I want y'all to be thinking about some good questions to ask me. I love to get into the Q&A, because sometimes there's some really good questions thrown at me. Harder the better. And so it's great to be here. It's been quite a journey that we've been on. A long way from Fulton and Tupelo to Hollywood. I went out to Hollywood, as I was telling some of y'all earlier, went out to Hollywood, and Criminal Minds had read the manuscript of my first book, Ghost of Shade of Pale, and they summoned us to Hollywood. So we went out to Hollywood, and that was quite an adventure and a fairy tale. Jim Clemente, the writer-producer for Criminal Minds, had read the manuscript, contacted me, and I asked him to read it and tell me if it was any good or not, if I should do humanity a favor and burn all copies in the midnight ceremony. And Jim finally got around to reading it because they were very busy, and he contacted me and he said, not quite done, I just wanted to tell you, stop and tell you, he said, you're not only a great writer, you're a great writer of American literature. That's what this is, a big crime stories literature. He said, come to Hollywood, I want to represent you. So that's how it all started for us out there. It was a huge break for us, a huge boost to my confidence as a new writer. People have told me in my life that, they said, you have a gift for writing, you should try the great American novel. And I'd written, technical papers in the corporate world after I left law enforcement, and I'd written op-ed pieces in my role as a manager in a corporation, and I've written political speeches for candidates. But the American novel, the big novel, was a totally different thing. And I finally began to try to do that, and I found out it's pretty hard to do. I was self-taught and got into it, and it's very hard to speak in other voices and other tenses. And Ghost of Shade of Pale, for those of y'all who hadn't gotten into it, is a pretty big and complex book. It's got a lot of threads in it. And when you start out on page 1 and you go down to page 400, it can be kind of tricky, to make all of those threads arrive at the end of the book and for the conclusion, and have harmony and integrity, and remember what one character said to another character 300 pages before that, and would they be saying what you have them saying now at page 350 or 400, all the nicknames, ages and associations, where they met, all those little vignettes that are hidden within the book, to make sure that you don't step on them and trip on them somewhere. And trust me, there's some reader somewhere who will remind you of your errors if you do. And so, you work as we did, and try to make sure that it came out as good as it could. And so we finally sent it to Jim out in Hollywood, because I knew his cousin, and asked Jim would he read it, and he did. And so we went out there to Hollywood. That was a big boost for us. Like I said, we drove out from Tupelo to Hollywood, across on I-40 across America, and we had so many books in the car. I exceeded the weight limit on my Murano, and had so many books there in the car that exceeded the weight limit, and we hit those bumps there. There wasn't any bounce, any spring left in the Murano. We had so many books, but probably 200 or 300 books, I guess, in the car, just to cover any book signings we could pick up, because we were brand new in those days, and we weren't in all the bookstores. And so we were kind of begging places to sign and doing consignment sales. And so when we got out to Hollywood, we met with Jim Clemente, and it was quite an adventure. When we first got there, we had been offered an hour on KKLA, the largest Christian radio station in America. an hour of drive time to talk to Southern California about this journey and about my faith and things of that nature. And everybody thought that was impossible, that would happen to us, but it did. And so we had an hour there to talk, and right after that we signed at a bookstore in LA metro area, and people had heard us on the radio, and they came into the bookstore, and even though we were brand new and 2,000 miles from home, we signed 100 books there that day, and sold more books at that Lifeway Christian bookstore than anyone ever had except Charles Stanley. He'd been on TV for 60 years, so we thought that was a pretty good company to be in. And then we went to meet Jim Committee in Beverly Hills, and Jim had set up an interview with an insider TV show called Media Mayhem. And we were driving through Beverly Hills, and Judy and I were like two country bumpkins. We were gawking at all the iconic images around us. And y'all are pretty young to remember this reference, but I looked at Judy and I said, Judy, we are the Beverly Hillbillies, and all we need is Granny up on top in the rocking chair, and we'd be complete. And we arrived there at this little place, this little secret, hidden away movie studio, and so we're not quite ready for you. And so we had lunch out on the sidewalk at this little restaurant. We're Jim Committee, and they brought us appetizers out that day. And the appetizers, I looked at them and I said, what is that? And they said, that's kale chips, sir. And actually it wasn't chips at all. It looked like leaves that I had raked up in my yard. Somebody had sprinkled Parmesan on them. And so I said, well, ma'am, I'm from Mississippi. I don't think I could eat that. And so we all had a good laugh about that. And then we went in the studio. It was a big moment for us, to be filming in Hollywood. And the lady who was going to interview me was a big entertainment lawyer out there, Allison Hope Weiner, and her brother created Mad Men on TV, very popular TV series. And a young man who came out of the dark. It was very dark in that studio, so much mystique there. You had to kind of watch where you walked, and had this big raised glass wraparound desk where we sat behind for the interview, and screens come up all around you in the dark, and showing images with a book cover of Ghostly, of images from the South during the period that my book was set. And the young man who came up to mic me and to powder my head, make sure I didn't glow on camera, he looked very familiar. It turned out he looked a lot like his daddy did when his daddy first broke onto the scene in the original Mad Max movie. It was Mel Gibson's son, Will. And I said, well, how's your daddy doing? And he said, well, he's doing good. I said, here, let me sign a book for him. And so every chance you get, when you're new especially, you want to see those books everywhere you can, especially with people who are opinion makers. And it's about networking, which if you don't know already, it will help you immensely in your life as you go through life to meet people, write their name down and somewhere, just as you should mine. I'll be glad to help you all anytime I can. But you always have that little, in the old days, before the age we live in, the little black book that I carried around in me, and I could flip to it and I could find somebody that I knew in almost any segment of the economy or business or whatever, or politics. I could go in there and to know somebody personally and have their telephone number to call them directly in a company or whatever. It's so much more fruitful and to know somebody to call rather than going through 800 number or through just taking your chances on who you're going to get. And so, but anyway, it's been a blessing for us, and we did that interview there in Hollywood, and it turned out really well. One of my favorite interviews really I've ever done. Both of them in LA, one on KKLA and one on Media Mayhem. Those are both on YouTube. If you ever want to drop by and listen to them, the one on Media Mayhem was very in-depth, And she has some hard questions, some very personal questions, but I like it. I like to be challenged and to engage people. And it must have went pretty well because she's invited us back, for book 2. And so we hope to do that. Possibly this summer if schedules permit. So I'm just seeing my friend coming in back there. So we did that, and then we took off right after that meeting out there straight for the set of Criminal Minds. And we're following Jim Clemente through Hollywood and the big boulevard of those tall palm trees. And we headed out there, and it was just a fairy tale experience. They waved us on through at the guards at the studio lot and parked us next to the producer's private space. And we went in, and everybody was so gracious to us. I want to tell you, if you ever go on a set where they're filming, one thing you can be sure of they're going to have is just bukus of food. And everybody was trying to feed us everywhere we went. There were tables for the stars and the cast and crew, and every time we walk along with them, they say, "Are you hungry? You want something?" And so Southerners, we could kind of identify with that. And so they were so gracious to us. We watched them film, and then we went out to the dressing rooms where some of them were relaxing between shots, and they came out and we posed and took a lot of pictures. And if you like Criminal Minds and you want to see some of these pictures that's like these that are on the board behind me and some more, friend me on Facebook and remind me. Be glad to send you a lot of those pictures on the set that kind of recreate the feel of the set. And people do that all the time. They ask me all the time to do that. And also, if you want to get a direct line to Hollywood and to Criminal Minds, you can friend me and then Jim Clemente, or you'll see on the cards I gave out and on the front of the book. Jim will accept your friend request when he sees our mutual friend is me. Because people do it all the time, he's used to it. So we had a great time there at Criminal Minds, and met Shamar Moore, and I told Shamar, I said, "Shamar, I've been following you since you were on The Young and the Restless." And he said, "Oh, the Malcolm days." And I said, "Yeah, the Malcolm days." And we met Joe Mantegna, who I've been seeing in movies forever, and I told him that, I said, Judy and I that's our second marriage. Our spouses passed away and been married that long. And I said, she'd never seen Godfather 3. I just showed it to her where you were brutally murdered in the streets of New York City for opposing Al Pacino, the Godfather. And Joe said, "I've been brutally murdered many times, inside and outside the movies," talking about critics. And Matthew Gray Gubler plays Dr. Reed. Everybody asked me, "Is he really that smart?" And I said, "Well, he seemed like he was." And he was kind of sick that day. He was worried about us catching his cold. And we said that would be okay. And so we've got some great shots. And Thomas Gibson, who plays Hotch, was very nice. And the whole crew showed us how they ran the show, and it's a well-oiled machine. It's their 10th year. And so they don't miss much now. Just when the cast moves through a scene, like the one we watched being filmed, the minute that's over and they say cut and they move out, the crew looks at their list, and they know whenever they work their way back to that room, what that room is supposed to look like by the time they get back there. And they told me, they said, "Merle, this may have been a sheriff's office in Louisiana, minutes ago. By the time they get back here, it may be the apartment of one of their stars or whatever. They just go in and tear out the walls, the carpet, they repaint, they move new furniture in, and it's just really fun to watch them because they're just so good at what they do and so gracious." And so after that great experience was finally over, and we sat on the jet plane that they fly in and all that kind of stuff. We headed out from there directly to the set of Major Crimes, the spinoff of The Closer. And because there, Tony Dennison was somebody I always wanted to meet, because before y'all's time, but there was in the 80s, there was a really good TV show called Crime Story. And Crime Story was a Michael Mann production, and Dennis Farina played the tough cop of this unit in Chicago, and Tony Dennison played Ray Luca, this classic gangster, the big pompadour and everything's kind of set in the late 50s, early 60s. And I thought it was a great series and a great soundtrack behind it. And so I'd always wanted to meet Tony, and he was starring in Major Crimes. So we went there and we're supposed to go out to dinner with him. And he said, well, we're running late on our shoot. Could you just come here and have dinner with us and the cast on the lot? And I said, well, sure. I said, oh, yeah, okay. And so, by this time, Judy and I were really getting into the singing out there, and so we went there, and they were so gracious to us there also, and, said it was their honor, not ours, to meet us, and we signed books for them at G.W. Bailey, who, again, before your time, was on MASH, the long-running TV series, and he was he's a face you'd know in the movies, you would know his name, and he was the cop in all the police academy movies that they're always putting things over on. It wasn't the brightest bulb in the lamp, and very gracious to us, and we went through the chow line with them, with all the cast and crew, and just quite a different experience, something you just think you're never going to have in your life, and all because of that first book, A Ghost of Shade of Pale. And so we did that, and then Jim says, well, we've got a meeting set up at dinner with the producers and the buyers for movies like Saving Private Ryan and The Patriot and 2012 and some of those big blockbuster movies. And people would give anything and pay anything but to have 15, 20 minutes with them. And so we had a 3-hour dinner. I met Jim, and we had this long dinner, and I'll tell you all the story that I tell on myself, but some people wouldn't. Judy couldn't go with me on that one, and she works GPS for me and keeps me from getting lost. And in LA, it's easy to get lost on those interstates of LA. You better get run over. And so it was quite harrowing, and I made my way there, and I thought, well, I've gotten here in plenty of time, and then I got off on the exit, and they were having road construction. That bogged me down, and then they were having a special kind of festival or something there in the town, Culver City, and so every time GPS was saying turn here, I had to pass it because I had it blocked off, and it was going recalculating. And so it got me all turned around. And so I thought, oh, time is really eating up now. I'm going to have to hurry. And I finally found a parking garage that had any spaces left in it, and I was hurried to park, and I rushed out. And rushing down the street, I was all turned around, trying to find my directions where to get to this restaurant. But I certainly didn't want to miss or be late, for this meeting, and I forgot to drop any breadcrumbs behind me, or to mark any landmarks in this strange place I'd never been in before. So eager to get there, and I found the restaurant, went in, met with Jim, we got our act together, what we're going to say and what not to say, and the producer came, we had this long meal, and he asked a lot of questions, about the book and about that time period and about Mississippi. And really, we were kind of a curiosity to him. I don't think they'd met too many Christians from Mississippi and all that kind of stuff. And so, but we had a great time. And so it was all about to break up, and I was thinking, well, this is going really pretty good. And then I realized it's dark and it's late now. It was light when I came in. I have no idea where my car was. And I thought, well, I'm certainly not going to admit it, here in front of an embarrassed Jim Clemente from Criminal Minds and this big-time producer. I'm going to tell him this bumpkin from Mississippi doesn't even know where his car is. And so we all got up, oh, that's great to meet you, and this kind of stuff, and then we had start walking out. He said, well, we'll be in touch, and they turned to go this way, and I turned to go with them. And they said, oh, you parked down this way too? And I said, I think so. So we walked on down a little ways, and we get out there, and to another turning point where they were going off toward where their parking garage was, and they started turning and said, well, we'll see you, and I turned with them. They said, oh, you parked down in this parking garage too? I said, I think so. So I walked with him, and then Jim peels off to give me a little, he goes off another way to give me a little moment along with the producer. And the producer's walking over toward the elevator to go up to this multi-level parking garage. And all I remember is wherever it was I parked, I was on the top level. There's nothing but sky above me. And we were walking, so I started walking over the elevator with him. He said, oh, you parked upstairs too? And I said, I think so. And so we get up to like the third or fourth floor, and he gets off, and I said, bye, be in touch. And then I just hit the top floor, and I want to tell y'all honestly, when those elevator doors opened late that night, and I saw that Murano with that Ole Miss tag on it, I wanted to fall down and kiss the concrete. So not many authors probably would tell that story on themselves, but hey, you know, you got to have some fun, and it all worked out, and you know, and we all laughed about it later, you know, how fun it was, and I told Judy when I got back to the embassy suites where we were staying that night, I said, you won't believe it, you won't believe what I did. And so we had a great time out there, and went up to Malibu. We got invited up to Malibu by the daughter of a former movie star to sign the bank of books up there, and got to see that beautiful drive up to Malibu over the coastline. And of course, y'all don't remember this, but riding along, that's where Frankie and Annette Funicello, Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello made a lot of their beach movies. And so I was looking for Frankie and Annette down on the beach, and right about there, Judy's trying to keep me from running off the cliff or something. And we left there, and finally left Hollywood after about 2.5 weeks, I guess, and headed up to Las Vegas. And we went up to Las Vegas and had a great time. We got a consignment sale set up there at Barnes & Noble, and wound up breaking their record for author sales there, and made some great friends in Las Vegas. And then came back home and just began to do radio and TV interviews all across the country. I've been on radio stations, I guess, everywhere from Anchorage to Orlando, and Dallas to Detroit, and Boston, and I was even on Israel National Radio recently, and that was a thrill. I had about 15 minutes there, and they a lot of those folks, they think I talk funny. But I think they talk funny. That's what I said about folks in Southern California. Is how do you like it? So we love it. I think the accent thing. We met so many nice people, and I love accents. I always, at the book signings, I always try to figure out, I hear the accents, and I try to figure out, where the folks are from. And I think it's a great thing, in the world we live in, a lot of us have lost our accents, and I think that's a shame. But just meeting people from all walks of life and different stories and everything, we're just blessed. I love to go out on the road and to do book signings because we don't just go in to sign quickly and get out like most authors do. It's a business to them, and they want to get in, get out, and get to the next place. But we want to meet everybody, hear their stories, and make friends for life. And we do. A lot of people friend us on Facebook and follow us on social media, and they pray for us, and they tell all their friends about the book. And that's one reason that that word of mouth is still carrying us on A Ghostly Shade of Pale. A Ghostly Shade of Pale is at the Barnes & Noble store here in Tupelo, which serves really West Alabama and up to Corinth and southeast Tennessee, and over toward Oxford, and down to the Golden Triangle. I'm in there a lot, so I see where their customer base comes from. It's a big store, and in the history of their store, Ghostly Shade of Pale is the all-time best-selling novel in the history of that store. And it keeps on selling. Not only is it the all-time bestseller, at Christmas it was in the top 4 Christmas gifts, even though it had been out, about 19 or 20 months then, and just a week or so ago, they told me it had jumped back into #1 in current sales again, and they said they'd never seen anything like it. and they keep permanent displays of it and the sequel to it, A Rented World, right there at customer services. And you know, it's just the word of mouth. It would be terrible if you wrote a book and people read it and they never recommended it to anybody. But we don't have that. People like Ghostly, and they recommend it to all their friends and family, and we get the nicest cards and letters from all over the country and sometimes around the world, you know, telling us what this book meant to them personally, what it reminded them of, what tragedy what storm they were going through, and how it helped them. A lady contacted me the other night, told me her son was climbing out of a deep valley of drug abuse, and that Ghostly was the first book that he read trying to scale that mountain. And he would call her every night to tell her, you know, Mama, this is what happened in the chapters I read last night, and this is what happened again. And she said, you'll never know how much that book meant to him, and how much you personally mean to him. But sometimes, I'll be honest with y'all, I get these calls and these messages and private messages on Facebook, and I'm sitting at my desk where my computer is, and where I also write, and I'm writing my third book in the trilogy now. And sometimes, I'll be honest, I sit there and I shed a few tears, because it's very touching and very tender. And a lady in the hospital who was recently battling cancer, she sent word that she would like to meet Michael, the character in Ghostly and the sequels, who's based on me. And so I went out and talked with her for 2 or 3 hours and prayed with her, and she had both books there by her bedside. And later, when she passed away, her Ghostly was on her bed. And so those things happen all the time. A lady in Jackson went on Facebook, and she had lost her husband, and she talked about that openly, about what she was going through, the grieving process. And she said, yeah, I'm trying to deal with it and everything. And she was talking about it, and she said, but then I was out on the interstate, and this gray van passed me. And I stopped and I said, you know, that's a van just like Michael and Clay in the book in Ghostly we've been doing surveillance in. And because Clay was based on my best friend, Claude, the chief of intelligence. And then she stopped and she said, about my husband, she said, I think I'm getting better. She said, I haven't thought of him in maybe a half hour. And that's the last line in Ghostly. And then she said, I just can't get that book out of my mind. These things are humbling, you know, for a writer, and they're the reasons that writers write, or at least the reasons they should write. And of course I get the other ones too. A lady in Australia, you know, contacted me and she said, Merle, I just finished your book, and Frederick, your villain, scared me so bad I had nightmares. And I said, well, I'm sorry you had nightmares, and I'm glad that, you know, the writing, you know, moved you, you know, to have strong emotions. And it's just fascinating, you know, in the book world, because so many things have happened that the experts told us, you know, could never happen, because it didn't have a big publishing house behind us, and a lot of money and certain advantages, but you know, we've been blessed. You know, God has opened doors for us just everywhere we've gone, and we met so many wonderful people. And I looked one day as this journey goes along, and I see there are all these resellers, you know, that are contracted with Amazon all over the United States, all these companies and businesses, and they're all reselling Ghostly Shade of Pale. So all the copies that are going out, we figure from anecdotal evidence that 6 to 8 people read every copy of Ghostly that goes out. It's held pretty firm from what we've been told. But that yet then, if they do find their way back into these resellers who buy them up, you know, then they go again. They get a whole new life, and sometimes they even claim to have new copies and even first edition hardbacks. I don't know how they get those. And people said, "Oh, aren't you mad? You know, you're not getting royalties off of those." I said, "Oh no, I'm thrilled. If we want to seed as many books as possible and get them into the hands of as many people." So I said, "I'm just happy they're not charging me, you know, to get the books out." And then I went to on eBay, we saw that there were people auctioning the books on eBay. And one company in Australia and one in England claimed to have 10 first edition copies that they were auctioning off. And I said, this is crazy, you know, but it's wonderful, you know. It'd be so sad if books came out and only my friends bought it and that was the end of it. Average sales across a whole spectrum of books that come and go is somewhere around 100 books are sold. You know, you think about Grisham and some of those folks and the big names that sell tons of books, but you know, a lot of people write books, and when they go through their friends and their family and their relatives, you know, that's you know, they're kind of out, and it kind of ends for them. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I tell people, you know, it's such a thrill to write a book and such a challenge. You know, you know, I say go for it. What's the worst that can happen? You know, you fall down or it doesn't pan out, but you'll always remember that you completed that dream of yours. And that may be all you ever want to do when it comes to writing. You know, is that one thing, but once you get it, you know, you've done it. And so I've learned so much about this treacherous book world, you know, over the last year and a half, 2 years or so, and learn what to do, what not to do, who to trust, who to not trust so much, which is generally things you have to learn in life, and where to invest your money that will yield something, where like a lot of people will tell you they'll move mountains, they'll open doors, they're happy to take your money, but often you see very little in way of results. And so I'll tell you, social media, I'll tell you all, has been huge for us because we, you know, authors on a very thin margin, and we work Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and if any of y'all are into writing at all, I would encourage you to go to LinkedIn if you're not members. There's some great author forums in there. KB Shaler moderates one of them. She's a friend of mine, a very nice lady, and a good writer, and everybody helps everybody else in there, all the writers. You know, everybody's at a different point along the path. And so when I made this commitment early on to write these books, you know, I chose this title, A Ghostly Shade of Pale. It was from a classic song from the 60s called A Whiter Shade of Pale. And that song, a lot of people don't know it, but it has, you know, backgrounds of drug abuse and consequences in it. It's a very kind of, I don't know, creepy may not be the right word, but it's a different kind of song. But it was very popular back in its day. And so we took the title A Ghostly Shade of Pale because Frederick, the main villain in the movie, he was a very evil guy, but he also suffered from albinism, and so he was a ghostly shade of pale. So I never deviated from that title once I committed to it. And so we stuck with it, and I found that writing this novel, like I said, was pretty difficult. And you know, there are many first drafts, first drafts, and when I had that one, I hated it. I just hated it. I said, it's lifeless, it's flat, it's the worst thing ever written, nobody's ever going to read it, and so on, and I left it alone for a while, which you have to do sometimes as a writer. You have to know when to walk away and just let it get some distance, you know, between you and what you've just done. And when I came back, I looked at it, and I saw, you know, what it needed, and what it needed was descriptors. And so I sat down from page 1 all the way through to the end, and I began to add descriptors. And when I did, a strange thing began to happen. Characters began to pop up off the page. They began to become living and breathing characters, so you could see what they saw, hear what they heard, feel what they felt. And as Judy is fond of saying, when Michael's driving down the dirt road, you can taste the dirt. And that's what you want to do as a writer. is bring people right to the foot of the action. And people, a lot of our reviews, people say it's like reading a movie. It's so visual, and that's what you want to hear. And so finally, we finally got the book out and began to talk to Jim, began to circulate it around for reviews. And the reviews began to come in over time, and they were very kind, very generous reviews, including one out of England at Crime Fiction Lovers, which was a break for us too. They read it and said it was, I don't know, used all kind of great, superlatives for it, and it was that was a big boost for us too, because once they endorsed it, they tweeted it out to all their followers around the world who looked to them for book reviews, and then all the other crime fiction sites retweeted their tweet in this world that we live in. And so that gave us a boost too, and you just work all of those channels, and then it begins to all begin to come together. Paper up near DeSoto County gave us a great, really a full-page spread with a book cover, some pictures, a review, and an interview, and they compared the writing to Thomas Wolfe, and I told them, well, I know that's one I'd not heard before, and some people don't know who Thomas Wolfe is, but he was a great, great writer, great figure in literature, and I said, I'm not sure about that, but sure looks good on the book cover, and so, and also they said that they were glad that I wasn't killed, because when they're in DeSoto County, one of the many things that's cited in the book, as fiction. Much of what's in Ghost of Shaded Pale, much of it did happen to me in real life, and it was there at Horn Lake when I was a young investigator that I was lured out. We hit an organized crime setup up there with the Mafia, the Dixie Mafia, and some people out of McNairy County, Tennessee. There was some original old Walking Tall crowd in the movies were down there too in the early 70s, and it was much like what we hit was much like what you saw in the original Walking Tall movie. And we went in and arrested a whole lot of folks, hit them when they were having a big gathering, and they were really unhappy with me. And I had an informant on the inside, and she told me that they were all having meetings of different factions about pooling their money and hiring someone to kill me. And I said, no, they're not going to do that. I was in my 20s, not much older than y'all are, and I thought I'd live forever. And I said, no, they're not going to do that. I said, it's bad business, kill a state police officer. The wrath of the world would come on. And so, but then the day came when I got a call from someone in Memphis who said, I know you did really well, but you missed some stuff. I know you did. I can give you those people that you missed and that information if you'll meet me. And I said, okay. I had a little funny feeling about it, and I said, okay. And he wanted to meet out in the woods somewhere. I said, no, we're not going to meet out in the woods. No. So we wound up meeting at the Horn Lake exit there, and it's not like the Horn Lake exit now. In those days, there was nothing at the Horn Lake exit. Now it's everything you could walk within walking distance. But then it was just an abandoned Gulf service station, and me, and turns out two of them showed up. And after I left the house, my first wife, who's deceased, got a call from my informant asking for me. Said, get a hold of him and tell him it's a setup, they're going to kill him. And my police radio had gone out and the highway patrol couldn't raise me. So I went up there and I'd taken my gun out of my shoulder holster and put it underneath my belt, closed my jacket, and got there. And long story, but it deteriorated pretty quickly. I should have left when I saw there were two, but I didn't. And violated a lot of procedure. And Jim Clemente, in some meetings we had in Hollywood, kind of screamed at me. He said, what were you thinking? And I said, well, I was young, Jim, thought I'd live forever, and I wanted to get that information in case it was really legitimate. And it deteriorated in kind of a standoff there. They were armed too, and long story short, you can read about it in the book. And what happened there just was right after I had come out from undercover. And I was undercover in South Mississippi, and we're going back to Tylertown. And the next month we're having a homecoming of sorts. I'm going back to Tylertown where I was taken hostage and held hostage, working solo undercover by two guys who decided they were going to kill me and keep their money. And so at this little shack out in midnight in the middle of nowhere, I was there, and when they put a shotgun in my stomach and a pistol to my forehead, and they decided they were going to kill me. And while they were debating where to dump my body, the one sitting across from me there at midnight, and this felt like, if y'all ever watch those bad big horror movies, you know, where everything goes bump in the night, and you think Freddy's going to jump out with his chainsaw. In a minute, that's what it was like. And it was just a creepy scene right out of one of those big horror movies. And he sat there across from me and had a Gillette razor blades, the old double-edged Gillette razor blades. And he was looking at me like eye to eye across from me. And he put it into his mouth, and he bit on it, and he twisted and twisted until he broke off in half this razor-sharp blade, and he chewed it and he swallowed it. And when he did, the blood just began to pour out of his mouth, bubble up at the corners of his mouth, and run down on his throat like a bad vampire movie. And he put his finger in the back of his mouth, and he said, "Want some?" And I said, "I don't believe I'd care for any." And then he got a whole box of long stem kitchen matches and lit the whole flame of that big box. And he bent over it with blood gushing out of his mouth there at midnight in the middle of nowhere around the Mississippi-Louisiana border. And he swallowed the fire with the blood coming out. And it's then I believed I was going to die, and it releases something in your mind. And my whole life flashed before my eyes, and I saw myself as a toddler with my parents, you know, images buried deep within my subconscious that I couldn't recall otherwise. And it was quite beautiful, really. I wouldn't recommend the stimulus it took to get to those visuals. Long story short, I survived, obviously, and you can read about it in the book. And then when I was promoted and became captain over the north half of the state, we were doing a heroin deal. And we had a heroin deal set up at Columbus, and it's told fictionally in the book. But when you read the book and get to that point, just know that there's not much fiction there. That's exactly as it happened. And we decided to buy a large amount of heroin from these people we'd already bought from to draw out their backers behind them, because they wouldn't trust front men with a lot of product and a lot of money. And so we had this buy bus set up. And so I was in my office in Tupelo. I was about to go meet the agents in Starkville to set the parameters of the deal and where we would be on surveillance to protect them in case something went wrong and so forth. And I ran down the stairs to jump in my car to go, always running late. I jumped in my car, cranked up, and as I put my hand on the gear shift, the spirit filled up my car. And I wasn't walking with God then, and I never experienced anything like that in my life. And the spirit wrapped all around me, all through me, all in, just everywhere in the car. It was overwhelming my senses. And it said, "Go back and get the bulletproof vest." And then it was gone. I will tell you, it terrified me. And I said, "What is that? I'm losing my mind." I said, "We don't have any reason to believe it's going to be any more dangerous than usual." He just didn't like to wear the vest because they were bulky and hard to conceal, even though it was November and cold and they had coats on. They still didn't like to wear them, and the vest we had in those days had no armor in them. You know, so they'd only stopped maybe a .38 caliber handgun. And I said, "I don't know where that came from. I'm losing my mind." I put my hand up again on the gear shift. When I did, the spirit came back in the car, and it wasn't optional. Go back and get the vest. Out loud, I said, okay. I got the vest, I went down, and the male and female agent who went in to do the buy, I said, "I want you to wear the vest." They protested, and I said, "Don't ask me why. Just humor me." And so they wore the vest and went to Columbus. I said, "Keep it in town so we can stay close to you today, behind buildings to hide behind. You know, if you're out on the long flats, you're very obvious. you know, who are those people? And so they said okay, but the deal got away from them and went and got out into the country south of the W, there in Columbus, on a high road that wound around on high embankment and big depressions on either side, and leading off in the swamp. And up here was a railroad crossing, and it was in the depression. There was a high trestle there, and right up by the clump of pine trees, we didn't know they had a sniper perched up there with a high-powered rifle covering the deal, security on the deal. And so when we had to lay back because there was nothing to hide behind. We were cars on either side of the agents doing the deal, and then the body mics we're listening to were cutting in and out. We were on the fringe range, and I probably was saying some unfortunate words about our procurement people. They couldn't get us any better, you know, body mics, transmitters than that. And they were cutting out. We heard them. It was choppy. You know, they were talking about the deal, and actually doing a test on the drugs right there. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's like, you know, stop. You're under arrest. Take narcotics. You know, da 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 da. And it cut out. And it goes silent. And the next thing, it comes back up, and we hear ta 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 ta. And I looked at Claude, and I said, Claude, it's like gunfire. And then the agents on the other side, Merle, they're under fire. And we all came across, and Claude and I came across the levee. The gun smoke was just hanging heavy in the air. And it was a scene of horror. And that day had come, this storm was coming in, and it was on clouds unlike I think I'd ever seen. They were just like squeezing all the light out of the earth that day, and just, you know, carpeting the sky. And that night it became the hardest freeze that I could ever remember. It was a sheet of ice from Jackson to Corinth that night in '76. And it was like the intersection of heaven and hell when we came across there. We were caught in the crossfire. We didn't know where the good guys were, who the bad guys were, and people were saying, get down, be careful. And as we rolled out of the car looking and trying to figure out where the snipers were, the female agent radioed to say, Merle, Jerry's hit bad. He's hit bad. I've got to get him to the hospital. I said, her partner, he had been hit 3 times. And I said, go, go, go. And she had wounded one of them who went in on the scene, went in to draw his weapon out. She'd shot him right through the wrist. And she took off, and people were firing at ghosts because they were scared. The agents were scared. They just seen one of their own, you know, shot 3 times. And I told them, cease fire. You know, you're shooting at shadows. And we finally secured the scene, and I walked out, even though they were telling me not to, but I thought the sniper had retreated into the swamp. And we secured the scene, retrieved the money that was just blowing down that hillside, thousands of dollars blowing like in slow motion. It was surreal. And when I was walking in the middle of that, looking up in the trees with my gun, you know, everything slowed down, and you could just taste the molecules. You were in the air. You were one with the environment, and it was much like what some of my friends had told me about who were in Vietnam in battles. They experienced very much the same thing. You could hear your heart just pounding the blood in your ears and everything. So we finally secured it, and when I went to the hospital to see about the agents and to see about the wounded violator, I walked in. He was there too to seek treatment. I placed him under arrest. I comforted the young female agent as best I could, and she was probably then about 21, and she looked like she was about 81 or something, because she just shot somebody just for the first time, and just seen somebody shot her partner for the first time. And then I went into the ER, and there they had my friend, the agent, on the table cutting the clothes off of him, and that white vest that I'd been commanded to go back and get was soaked crimson in blood. And the doctor said, come over here and look at this, Merle. And he had his hand up in the entry wounds. His hands were larger than mine. And he said he was hit once in the lower extremities, one slice through his right arm. And he said, this one hit him in the chest. That's where he had his arms up in the entry wound. He said, you know, it penetrated the vest, but the vest wasn't designed to stop a high-powered rifle, only up to 38 maybe. And so, but he said it took some of the punch out of it and deflected it, so that when it went in behind his right breast and skidded around the barrel of his rib cage and popped out behind his left breast. He said, Merle, if he hadn't had that vest on, it'd taken out his heart and lungs and he'd been dead before he hit the ground. I still get chill bumps now after, almost 40 years, remembering that like I did that day. And I could hear the shuffle of angels' feet around us that day, and I knew we were not alone. And so it was, many of those things are in Ghostly Shade of Pale. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to. And the sequel is out now, Rented World, which follows Michael as he begins to leave the Bureau and goes into the corporate world and finds out there are a lot of bad guys there too in politics, and finds out there are a ton of bad guys there. And follow him on that journey and what he learns. And it's a warning in all of our books that this is just a rented world that we live in, full of danger and darkness. And to paraphrase Thoreau, all that's necessary to lose yourself is to be turned around once with your eyes closed and with your conscience muted, to be lost, and you'll never know what hit you, because there are really some dangerous people in the world, some of them in very high positions. And working on the third in the book now called The Redeemed, and the third in the trilogy. And so after that, we'll see what we're going to do. I think maybe write a book about all the miracles we've seen and all the notes and letters and calls that I've gotten, and truly remarkable, little testimonies that people sent us about what the books mean to them. And I didn't tell you all, but I did tell you, I will tell you, there's potential writers and people who are going to be asked to compromise in many ways. When people in the industry first read my book, they said, well, this is pretty good, but you need some neon in it. And I said, neon? I said, how do you define neon? And they sent back some of my writing with just the worst profanity you can imagine, sprinkled throughout the book. And I said, no, I can't do that. It's not necessary. I'm not going to do it. And they, of course, they like the graphic intimacy and then they asked me, they're so formula-driven at this time, when this was first going on in the first book. They said, well, vampires are really hot right now. Could you add some vampires to it? I said, well, we met a lot of bad guys. I'm not sure they were certified vampires, unless it was that guy eating the razor blades, And I said, no, I can't do that. And they said, you might not want to mention God either. You might offend somebody. I said, let me see if I understand. Profanity good, sex good, vampires good, but God not good. And I said, no, I can't do any of that. I said, I'm writing books that if my mother and my English teacher were still living, I would not be ashamed for them to read them. And I'll tell you all truly that there's been such an outpouring of response, because people hadn't read a book like this in a long time. Because everybody wants to load it up with all that gratuitous language and stuff, and sometimes it's a substitute for good writing. And not always, but sometimes. And so consequently, there are schools all the way down to the 8th grade using Ghostly in their English classes that wouldn't have been able to if I had yielded to what they asked me to do. So, it'll be a challenge you'll face in many areas, whether you're a writer or not. People always want you to compromise and to go along and get along. And they profess to be the experts and the keepers of all knowledge. Like one in England, in an author forum, he said, well, to use the language of the street is just absolutely essential. I'm editing a big, gritty crime drama, and it's absolutely essential. I said, I just wrote a big, gritty crime drama, and Criminal Minds endorsed it. I said, no, it's really not. And so, with a screenplay that's going on now, I met with Morgan Freeman, had dinner with him. He's going to look at the screenplay. He's a nice guy. We had fun. We sang songs together. Well, okay, I admit it. He sang. I just kind of wailed. Much better than I am. I was at Ground Zero Blues Club, but I think I can deal with Morgan. Hollywood likes to junk things up, and they're notorious for taking good books, like they did with Grisham's first, and kind of messing with it. And so that'll be the challenge when the screenplay is finished, is to let people know that you can't throw money at me and get me to yield and agree to destroy what the book actually is. And there's just too many people in there, and too many people who love the book, and people that I've tried to honor in the book also, fictionally, that I just can't yield to any of that. So, but we're blessed, and it goes on, and who knows what's going to happen. And I really would like y'all to come out, if you'd like to, get on Facebook and come out. And we have a big party for Jim Clemente when he comes from Hollywood, the writer, producer, and passes on everything, authenticity, first responder, ground zero, quite an extraordinary human being. When he comes here, you know, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You know, when you see it, come, free food, good time, meet Hollywood person, and ask him any questions you want to. He's such a kind and generous and patient person. And so with that, I know we're probably running really close on time. I want to stop and ask you, if you have any good questions for me today. Yes, ma'am. Kathy.
The book is based on your life, because St. Hill. Who is Frederick based on?
Well, Frederick is a composite character. You know, sometimes you use those in novels, and you pick a little from here and a little from there and a little from over yonder, and you kind of, you know, put them all together and come up with a pretty scary character. You know, people remember Frederick, and they talk about him a lot, and you know how he scares them, and he's, you know, he speaks to them within the framework of who he is and what drives him, the madness and his Satanism and that kind of stuff, you know. So it's kind of a composite character. There are maybe one or two more composites, but most of the characters in there are drawn directly from someone, you know, someone inspired them. May not be exactly like that person always, but Ghostly's about 65% probably drawn, or 70 drawn from real life events. Maybe a little more. Rennie World is 90% plus in the second book. So it's always tricky when a first publisher asks me if anybody's going to show up to murder us all. You know, when the first book came out, I said, no, I think most of the folks who would object are no longer with us, either by natural or unnatural means, or by the lifestyles they're living. You know, they're not with us anymore. But so many people here in Tupelo, when the book first came out, because most of Ghostly is set from Tupelo to Memphis in the 70s, and they would call me and say, I think I know who this person is, who that person is, and usually they were right. And Congressman Alan Nunley, who just passed away recently, he read it on the jet going back to Washington, and he called me and said, I think I know who this corrupt politician was, and he was right. And I think maybe, possibly the last book, maybe the last book he had, I know just right when I signed in December, he had a copy reserved for him, told me he was going to have one reserved, so I hope he got into it, and I think he would have enjoyed that one, because it had a lot of political stuff in it. Any other questions? Oh, come on now.
Say something about Dixie that you told us running about the character Dixie.
Oh yeah, has anybody read it? I've read Dixie. Yeah, okay, yeah. Have you gotten through it all? What did you think about Dixie?
I liked her.
Well, were you sad? Yeah. Some people over at Fulton the other day, some of the students said, you know, what kind of mad were you because of what happened to Dixie? I won't go into it too much. And I said, well, actually, I said, you know, the character, the person she was inspired by is actually still alive and well. She came to my book signing in Memphis, and so we met her up there. Judy got to meet her, one of my old girlfriends. And so, but that, you know, it's interesting how you pull pieces from your past all around, and it all comes together all these decades later into a book. And never would have dreamed it. I told people when I was at Ole Miss, you know, if I'd been walking past the library there, if one of my friends had said, hey, Merle, see that big old library there? One day your books will be in it. I would have said, well, what is wrong with you? But you never know what's waiting for you down the path. Any other good questions? Yes.
How long did it take you to write it?
Oh, the first one, it took me probably 2 or 3 years or so more, because it was a learning process and self-taught. You know, start, stop, start again. Sometimes a chapter that I thought should be chapter 2 or 3, you know, it turns out it might be chapter 25 or something, and chapter 25 might be chapter 2 or 3. You know, you start trying to work and get everything to flow. And it's just a learning process, and we kind of sketched it out, and kind of when you work, you know where you begin. If you know where you begin and know where you want to end, you know, that's probably the first thing after the title. To me, the title is important. It's an anchor. And then you start at that, and you then begin to try to fill in and try to figure out how to do the chapter breaks, and we learned a lot, and it changed a few things in book 2 that we learned that might work a little better. So it's a long, arduous process, and even when I get bogged down now in book 3 and think, oh my gosh, it's not flowing, I don't know if I can do this one or whatever, I stop and remind myself, that's the same thing you felt about both of the prior books. Oh, how can I do this and everything? And sometimes remembering all those things that I draw from, since I write from memory, can be very painful. And Judy has caught me, sitting at my keyboard, tears coming down my face. And she worries about me. And I said, oh, I'm just cleaning out closets in my mind. Thought I cleaned them out, evidently I haven't. And I said, it'll be good for me in the end. It is very purging, very, very, very cleaning. And you discover things about yourself when you're writing that you don't know by going back and then visiting those things and trying to flesh it out so the reader will understand it. You begin to understand it during that process. And so it's another good reason to sit down and write if you ever had the desire to do so, because you may be surprised, what you discover about yourself. Because most writers, to one degree or another, write about what they know. It may not be as true as I've been in these books to the history and timeline of my life, but to one degree or another they are. And so it's a complex process, but one that's can be very rewarding and kind of prepare you to go on in life and tie up a lot of loose ends. And on the book tours, it's given me a chance to go out and say 1 or 2 things to people I haven't seen in decades, and many times I either say thank you or I'm sorry. And they never remember what you're thanking them for or what you're sorry about. And I tell them, that's okay, I do. And it's a gift to me to be able to do that through this process. And one in Jackson came over to me and whispered in my ear at the signing. He said, you did change the names in this book, didn't you? And I said, yes, to protect the guilty and the innocent. And and I never was able to tell the agents why I wanted them to wear the bulletproof vest, but I did on the book tour. And I talked with the female agent. I talked with her by phone for about 2.5 hours, and she cried and I cried, and Judy was able to meet the agent who was physically wounded in Columbus. We met with him for a meal, and I got to tell him too why I insisted that you wear the bulletproof vest that day and everything, because he wouldn't have been there sitting with us, had that not happened and everything. So just so many things happening to us out on the road. Kroger's has picked up both books and doing some signing for Kroger stores. They said that would never happen, and just meeting a lot of nice people, some famous, some not famous, and we're making friends for life. Any other questions before we have to go? Yes, sir.
When you were being introduced, you said you worked with the Reagan administration. Can you talk about that some?
I volunteered in the campaign. I came out of the Bureau of Narcotics, went into the Bell system, because I had to leave because I investigated a corrupt governor. Had chaired up our internal affairs investigation, and they weren't real happy with me after that. They took a lot of hits in the press, and some people had to go, and then they kind of came after me, and that's what a lot of people do to people in government. If you don't play ball, they'll come after you in many ways. But anyway, the Bell system offered me a job, and I was as a security manager. And I went into that and in 1978, 79, and I met some people and became to know Reagan's Southern Finance Chairman, and I became, they asked me if you want to be, since you're known in law enforcement, if you would like to be State Criminal Justice Chairman for Reagan, for President. And I said, sure. And so I got to, about 3 weeks before the election, I got to drive as finance chairman up near the Columbus area to the Sheriff's Boys and Girls Ranch up there, and I got to be along with Reagan and meet him, and got a lot of great pictures. Any all interested, friend me on Facebook, stuff record, and I'll send some of those to him on the stagecoach and sitting in a porch swing and all that kind of stuff. So it's very exciting. I got to meet a lot of iconic figures in my life, including Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of England. I got to meet Charlton Heston, and I think that thrilled Mama the most. I had met Moses, he played Moses, in that famous Ten Commandments movie. And just met countless congressmen, senators, ambassadors, and entertainers, and so on. It's a lot of good memories. Some not so good, but crossed paths with I think about 5 presidents in my life, and so it's been God's been good to me in the good times and the bad times. Anything else? And yes, ma'am.
Was your life, when he was younger, was it kind of like the Criminal Minds, the TV show that we watched? I mean, like.
Oh, when I was in the Bureau?
Was it kind of like that?
Yeah, to a certain extent. They enhance things. I think they have to, to be entertaining. But some of what we did was very mundane at times, but also some of it was very fast-paced and very exciting. And the adrenaline would flow because you're in situations and you saw. But you saw things that too were hard to look at. We had an agent that came up missing, and we went to try to find him because he didn't show up at his mother's house, and we wound up out in the woods. And when you walk up on somebody who's been shot and killed and been there for a while, it's not a very pleasant thing, especially with somebody you know. And in the book too, for those of y'all who read it, where the agent is killed in Corinth, that really happened. That was the saddest funeral I'd ever been to. I guess at that time I'd never been to a funeral of anyone who, hadn't just died of a disease or wasted from old age or whatever, but the real Agent Lane, he was shot and killed at about 25, and everybody loved him. He was a great young man, but frozen forever at that age, and his brother is circuit clerk in Alcorn County. He came down when we launched our first book deal at Reed's downtown. That's where we launched Ghostly. He came down, judges and prosecutors and agents and people from the old days showed up, and the experts there had told us that we know the market here, and you're new, you've been gone from home a long time, you're back, but you're a new writer, and sometimes they don't turn out for even the big names here. So expect, don't be disappointed. If you sell 25, 30 books, you'll be doing really well. We signed 235 books, and I didn't have time to go eat. They just brought something for me to munch on at my table, and people just kept coming in. And of course, we talked with a lot of them too, and slowed it down some. But that's a lot of folks at a book signing who all want to talk to you, and they all want their book personally inscribed, and it was just a joy. Oh, what a joyful day that was. And everybody, Mr. Reed, Jack Reed Sr. here, told me, he said, Merle, if everybody worked as hard as you do, turned out people for book signings, we'd all be in great shape. And then at the Lee County Library, Friends of the Library, after I finished speaking, he rose to speak, and he's like E.F. Hutton in these areas. That little commercial, when he speaks, everybody listens, and he told them that Ghostly Shade of Pale, everybody knew he was friends with Grisham. He gave Grisham his start when Grisham couldn't give away his books. They let him have a signing at Tupelo when he showed up with some by himself in the trunk of his car. Those days are long gone. But everybody knew he was close to Grisham, and he got up and announced that it was on the par with A Time to Kill, with that quality. And when he said that, I looked at him and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Reed, I couldn't quite hear you. Could you say that again and a little louder, please?" And speaking to our microphone, our recorder. And it turned out I didn't know it, but the library was filming it, so we have that on tape. And he said, "Quote me anywhere you want to." And so when I come in to read, sometimes they'll yell around the corner and say, "Dad, your favorite author's here." And he'll come around and say, "Written anything new?" I said, "Working on it." And so he's had a little light stroke now. I think he has a harder time reading now. But I was so glad that he was there because I mentioned Reed's in front of our ghostly when Michael leaves. Old Miss, and he buys a suit he can't afford at Reed's. I said, Mr. Reed, I said, "I've been waiting for years now to see if you would, this book would come out, if you would get it and you would read it and see that." He said, "I did, and we appreciate it." So, anything else before we go? I'd stay here all day. I know y'all got places to go. Yes, sir.
As a participant in the drug wars, how do you feel about the state it's in today and the de-escalation given how it's gone through the past several decades?
Well, I think it's a lot of collateral damage. It's as a person who loves liberty and always tried to hold to the Bill of Rights, even in those days. It distresses me sometimes to see, government will often take a legitimate cause and use it to gather power and expand their base and encroach and infringe on civil liberties. And so I would say that there are things that are done now in the current war on drugs that we would never dream of doing. And we didn't have the power to do it then, and frankly, I'm glad we didn't have some of that power. And I told the agents at the Bureau now who wanted me to come down and meet with some of them at West Point, and I did, great guys. And they said, "We wish it was like it was in your day, the Wild West." They said, "Now, 80% of what we do is wiretaps." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And I said, "We didn't have that power, and I'm glad we didn't because there's such potential for abuse." And so, it's a balancing act. Anytime when you draw government into something, what's the cost? And you look back and, in any situation, even good situations where people try to do good things, one thing you can count on in life, the manipulators are going to come in. The people who are there to make money, to manipulate emotions of people, and to always offer that false choice, what I call that Faustian choice, between liberty and security, and give me a little more liberty here, a little more liberty there, and I'll keep you safe. And it's a false choice. And like Franklin said, he who would trade liberty for security may soon find he has neither. So I think it's always constantly a balancing act, and it's just, you just can't lock up everybody in the world, and you have to, I believe, really and truly, I believe that you have to reserve prison space for people who truly scare you, who are true and present, a clear and present danger to the public, and be judicious with the use of that. And but everything is cyclical, and I think you see changes already, changes being made, and a lot of people did, fought the war and valiantly paid a terrible price for it, and honored them and knew them and loved them and everything. But I think some of them here, if some of them were still here today, I think they would be voicing some concerns too, on the civil liberties side, and some of them were very, even though they worked for government, they were very mistrustful of big, overwhelming central government, that had lost contact, with the people in some ways. And if you read A Ghostly Shade of Pale, I outlined some things even in those days that were very disillusioning to us, about intelligence agencies, using mercenary pilots to hop out of our small oil airfields here in Mississippi and to run guns into Central America for whichever side we were supporting at the time. And the problem was they weren't coming back empty. They were coming back loaded to the gills, you know, with drugs. And the only question we had was it sanctioned or unsanctioned? And sometimes we thought it was sanctioned. And it's very disillusioning to young, especially young idealists, you know, who had just come out of college, hailed as the new centurions, the first big wave of college-educated police officers. And, you know, and then you get out and you find out that life is just not quite as neat and tidy, you know, as I told you that it is, you know, and the downside of that was I saw some good people who lost their way. You know, they got very disillusioned, they got mistreated, and, you know, there were a few here and there who just said, well, me too, you know, and they lost their way. And very, very tragic what happened to some. You know, most didn't, but some did, and there were just a lot of casualties around. I'll talk about that a lot in that interview with Media Mayhem. She was very good. She pressed hard and could get the best out of it. That's why I look forward to going back and seeing Allison again and doing another interview like that, because she's a really challenging interviewer. But I appreciate that question. Somebody else over here? I see a hand somewhere. Well, yes, sir.
Do you have like any specific actors you want playing you in the movie or anything like that?
Well, they asked me that in Hollywood, you know, and I said, gosh, I've lost touch, you know, with this current crop of young movie stars, and they started throwing some names at me. I said, I don't know who they are, and they kept pressing me, oh, come on, give us a name, and I said, well, I finally said, well, I'm just sorry that Clint's just too old now to play for him. And I got to tell you all a story too about Clint Eastwood. I was talking to Morgan Freeman. I said, how's Clint doing? He said, well, he's doing great. You know, he's like 84 now, whatever. And I said, yeah, I know. I can't get my head around that. I was raised on Eastwood. And he said, but I enjoy working with him. I said, well, y'all work so well together, $1 Million Baby and Unforgiven. And Morgan had him over in the Delta, riding him around in a pickup, an old pickup. And there was guys hunting south of Oxford. They'd hunted there for years. They didn't know that the land had changed hands, and that Morgan had bought it. And they were walking out of the woods, and they suddenly hear that voice saying, what are y'all doing here? They turn around, it's Morgan Freeman. You know, they were like, oh, they can't believe it. And they start talking to him, Morgan's laughing, and they walk back to the pickup truck with him, and there's Eastwood sitting in the pickup truck. And on the way back to Clarksdale, there was a couple broke down on the side of the road. And they were telling everybody, nobody believed them. They were saying, yeah, we broke down on the side of the road right at sundown, and this little old pickup pulled up next to us and rolled down the window and said, can we help y'all? They said, you won't believe who it was. It was Morgan Freeman and Clint Eastwood. And everybody goes, yeah, right. You know, what were you drinking, you know? And you know, I love to hear these behind-the-scene stories. A friend of Grisham's came to our first signing, and he said, Merle, we know what you're going through. Remember what it was like when John was brand new. He said he couldn't give his books away. We were going door to door in Tupelo, begging people to buy the books or give them away. And I said, we're going back to Jackson with him to the legislature. They were all in the legislature. And they said, we felt the need for some liquid refreshment. And they stopped to get some beer at a convenience store. They said, the only problem was, Merle, we didn't have any place to put it. So we backed up to the dumpster and started throwing out first editions of The Time to Kill in the dumpster, and they're going on eBay now for $3,000 or $4,000 a piece, you know. And it pained me to hear that, but also I love to hear those stories, those behind-the-scenes stories, you know, about that. It's like we were in the club that night. Of course, the ground zero is Morgan's place, and we're sitting there, and you know, I was on a diet again because we've been out on the road, and I've gained a lot of weight, and so they brought me this big platter, and it's dark in there, and it's this big English band playing. It can make the guitars weep, and all these rockers had come in from England on a blues tour who backed up Van Morrison and The Who and a lot of those bands, and so I had come there to meet them too at a cocktail party, and we all went to Ground Zero after I'd met Morgan, and I was handing out Elvis t-shirts to them. From the Elvis fan club here. It's been here since '54, and they were scooping them up like they were gold bars in Fort Knox. And then Morgan sent somebody over and said, no, he wants you over here at his private table, and they were holding up the rope. So I went over there and sat right across from him. We talked all night, but he brought me this big platter of fried catfish, fried okra, and other southern delights. And I was trying to be good, and I ate my portion. And I motioned for the waiter he could pick it up. And when I was doing like this, and I hear that voice out of the movies go, what's the matter? You didn't like it? And I said, no, Morgan. I said, I got up the other day on the road and I couldn't snap my britches. And he just died laughing. And he had his girlfriend with him there that night. And I was taking pictures, as I always do, and I posted them up on social media. And I got thinking, well, maybe I should ask him, if it was okay. And I said, is it okay for me to post this on Facebook? And he just looks at me dead serious. He's an actor. And he said, well, it's okay with me, but I don't know what her husband's going to think about it. And I said, well, okay. I said, well, I guess Clarksdale's like Las Vegas. What happens here stays here. And then he just died laughing. He just pulled in my leg, And so, you find out these folks, are human beings too. And, when I asked him what his secret was, because he's about 77, I think now, and what's your secret of staying so youthful looking? It teased him. He smiled from ear to ear, and I wasn't playing it really. I really was wanting to know, but he was really pleased that that somebody would say that. And so you forget, they're human beings, and most of them are pretty nice people, because most of them have come up the hard way. They weren't always famous. They weren't always rich. They sometimes were struggling to find a meal somewhere and get a job. So it's just been a blessing to meet them. Any other questions? Well, it sure has been a joy and an honor to be here with y'all. And did I mention that y'all should friend me on Facebook? and leave a review on Amazon? Did I mention that?